My name is Zafar, and I have been driving trucks for the last 25 years. I have seen every kind of road, from Karachi port to the Torkham border, from the dry mountains of Quetta to the foggy highways of Punjab. I have endured every kind of weather and met every kind of person. A truck driver's life, anyway, is half sleep, half journey, half danger, and half prayer. This incident happened about 7 years ago. It was winter. I was parked at a transport yard near Faisalabad waiting for the next load. My truck was old but strong, a Bedford body with a new deck, a heavy-sounding engine, and a high wooden body at the back covered with a tarpaulin for long journeys. With me was my cleaner, Asim, a 22-year-old boy, hardworking but a little timid, especially on deserted night roads. He would recite verses without reason. That evening, we were sitting outside a roadside eatery at the yard, drinking tea. The fog was slowly descending. In the yellow light of the eatery, the shadows of trucks were growing long. On one side, a mechanic was fixing the last puncture of the day, and from a distance, the occasional horn of a passing truck felt as if the night was pulling a long sound from inside itself. At that moment, a man came up to me. Middle-aged, clean white shalwar camis, a brown waistcoat over it, an old-looking register in his hand, and on his face a seriousness rarely seen among ordinary transport brokers. He asked, "Zafar, you're the driver?" I said yes. He sat down close to me and said in a very direct tone, "There is a special load for tonight. You will be paid double. The goods need to be picked up from Faisalabad and delivered to a warehouse near the old cemetery road before dawn." At first, I took it as ordinary business talk, because night loads are nothing new in transport. Sometimes a factory sends urgent goods, sometimes wedding supplies, sometimes machinery, sometimes items that must reach the market before morning. But the way the man said "special load," the sharpness in his tone, startled me. I asked, "What is the goods?" He closed the register, looked at me and said, "Wooden sealed boxes. Think of them as old household items. Do not let anyone touch them on the way, and at the destination, just hand them over to the people who will meet you." I laughed and said, "Brother, if they're just wooden boxes, why all the secrecy? Is there something valuable inside?" He did not answer with a smile. He simply took a wad of notes from his pocket and placed half the payment in front of me. The money was indeed more than double. At times like this, a driver's mind counts first and questions later. I looked at Asim. He was silent, but on his face was the same unease that came over him at every strange thing. I asked the man for the complete address of the destination. He wrote a short address on a piece of paper: Old Western Cemetery, end of dirt road, Sirdar Timber Warehouse. Then he looked into my eyes and said, "One thing remember. If you hear sounds from the boxes on the road, do not stop the truck. The wood is old. It settles in the cold and makes noises." Hearing this sentence, Asim immediately looked at me, but I brushed it off with a laugh. In transport work, many people present their goods as special so that drivers take extra care. I took the advance, started the truck, and we headed toward the warehouse the man had described. The warehouse was in the old industrial part of the city. After nightfall, the factories fall silent. Outside the gates, watchmen sit near coal stoves, and the streets are left with only dogs, smoke, and the cold walls of closed shops. When we arrived, a large iron gate was half open. Inside, there was faint light. But the strange thing was that in such a big warehouse, there was no activity, no noise of workers, no forklift, no sound of loading. Only 4 men were present, all wrapped in shawls, their faces more in shadow than in light. They gestured us inside. The truck was backed up, and then the boxes appeared. They were not ordinary wooden boxes. About 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, made of strong wood with iron strips around each box. On the sides, numbers were painted in white, but in a strange style. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 boxes in total. I placed my hand on one box. The wood was very cold. So cold that it felt as if it had been stored not in the outside fog but in a freezing room. Asim said softly, "Sir, who does this goods belong to?" I scolded him. "Mind your work. The money is good, just load and go." But when 4 men lifted the first box together, the weight felt strange. Not too heavy, not light, but a dead kind of heaviness, as if something inside was not stacked but placed. When the box was set on the truck floor, a faint thud came from inside. One of the men immediately looked at me, then said, "Wood is settling." The same sentence, the same words. For the first time, it did not seem like a coincidence. During the loading, another thing happened. As the 7th box was being lifted, some mud fell from underneath. I shone my torch on it. The dirt was not ordinary, slightly wet, slightly black. I asked, "What is this?" A man quickly swept it away with his foot and said, "Old household stuff, just dust." Then he pulled the tarpaulin over with his own hands, tied the ropes, and even placed a thick black cloth over the boxes, though the tarpaulin was already enough. As we were leaving, the same man in white clothes who had approached me at the yard came close again and said, "Reach before dawn. After morning the door will be locked, and if anyone asks on the way, say it is empty wood." I asked, "Give me the phone number of the warehouse." He said, "Phones don't work there, people will be there." Then he handed me a slip of paper with only one name written on it, "Mr. Rafik, he will receive." We departed around 11:30 p.m. The fog had become thick, and the cold was such that despite the windows being closed, our hands were freezing in the cabin. As the city lights fell behind, the road became long, deserted, and silent. The truck's headlights cut through the fog, creating a yellow path ahead, and the weight of the sealed boxes behind kept reminding me that tonight's journey was not ordinary. Asim was silent at first. Then he tried the radio. Every channel either had static or an old song playing in a broken, crackling voice. He turned it off. After a while he said softly, "Sir, can I ask you something?" I said, "Ask." He said, "If they are wooden boxes, why are they nailed shut so tightly?" I had no answer. Perhaps the same question was already in my mind. The first sound came a few minutes after midnight, very faint from the back of the truck, like something inside the wood shrinking and shifting its place, or like something stored in a sealed trunk turning over very slowly. I ignored it. If a driver pays attention to every sound, he will never complete a night journey. A few minutes later, the sound came again. This time clearer, thud, thud. Asim immediately looked at me. Without turning to him, I said, "Cold weather, wood settles." But as I said it, I did not believe my own voice, because the sound did not feel like wood expanding or contracting. There was a pause, as if someone was deliberately waiting before making the next knock. Then came a long silence. There was no other vehicle on the road, only our truck, the fog, the heavy growl of the engine, and somewhere far away the lonely bark of a village dog. Then suddenly, from the back, a sound like someone dragging their fingernails across the wood. Once, then again. This time the sound was long and scraping, as if something inside a confined space was trying to find a way out. Asim immediately began reciting a powerful verse, but my own hands had already tightened on the steering wheel. At that moment I remembered the man's sentence, "If you hear sounds, do not stop the truck." At first I had thought it odd. Now it felt not like an instruction but a warning. We did not stop, but the sounds kept coming at intervals. Sometimes from one box, sometimes from another, sometimes from directly behind the cabin, so close that it felt there was not just an iron wall behind our heads, but something breathing. At one point, Asim said in a trembling voice, "Sir, I swear someone coughed back there." I said sharply, "Shut up and sit down." But a few seconds later, I heard it too. Not a cough, but as if someone had been holding their breath for a very long time in a closed space, and now a dry, dead air had escaped from them. Then came the first whisper, so faint that at first I thought it was the tire rubbing on the road, but the sound turned into words. Not from the back, it felt as if it was coming from inside the wall between the truck's deck and the cabin. "Zafar." Just my name. I put my foot on the brake, then immediately steadied myself. Asim stared at me, his eyes wide. I said nothing. A few moments of silence. Then the whisper came again, this time longer. "Zafar, your wife is awake at home." A cold chill went down my spine. My wife really was ill that night, and as I was leaving, I had told her to lock the door from inside. Asim did not even know that. I reached for my mobile, but there was no signal. The whisper came again. "She checked the latch twice. If she checks a third time, someone will be standing behind her." Asim, panicking, recited a prayer. I gestured for him to stay silent. But now the fear inside me was beyond my control. I increased the truck's speed. Driving fast in thick fog is dangerous, but that night, driving slow seemed even more dangerous. A few moments later, another voice came, different from the first, dry and thin, like an old woman speaking without teeth. "Asim." Asim froze completely. The voice whispered very softly, "Your mother placed an oil lamp at the door today. Where were you, son? Have you returned safely?" Asim looked at me as if he had stopped breathing. He stammered, "Sir, I never told anyone this." I said firmly, "Whatever it is, do not answer." But it seemed the thing behind had heard our words. The whisper came closer, so close that it felt like lips were pressed against the back wall of the cabin. "Do not answer, but listen. Both of you listen." Then the voices that began were not just frightening, they were entering our homes. One whisper said, "Zafar, your little daughter gets a fever at night, doesn't she?" Another said, "Asim, your younger brother took money from under your pillow today." Then came the sound of nails on wood again. Then a faint laugh from inside a sealed box, a laugh that never completed, that got stuck in the throat. Asim was near tears. He covered his ears with both hands, but the voices still reached him, because they did not seem like outside sounds. It felt as if the words were descending directly into his mind. "Asim, your mother will wait until morning, but if you stop the truck, that waiting will end." I began reciting sacred blessings loudly, my tongue stumbling. From the back came a simultaneous thud from 3 different boxes, as if 3 separate things inside had responded at the same time. Then a very slow, heavy man's voice said, "Stop, take out one, just one." Asim screamed, "Sir, don't stop." At that moment from behind, a sound like a child crying, very faint, muffled, as if someone had placed a cloth over the mouth. Asim said, "Sir, there is someone alive inside." My heart broke for a moment. This was perhaps what the voices had been waiting for. If I had stopped, if I had lifted the tarpaulin, if I had opened just one box, by morning, we might also have been written on some receipt as received. I hardened myself and did not stop. The child's cry continued for a few seconds, then suddenly turned into laughter, a thin, dragging, inhuman laughter. Asim closed his eyes. The whisper came again from behind, "Good, you did not stop, the last one who stopped. One room in his house is still locked." Then complete silence. No thud, no nails, no breath, no whisper, only the truck's engine and the fog. But we knew that whatever was behind had not slept. It had only become quiet. After that complete silence, the road felt even longer. The fog had not lifted. If anything, it had grown thicker, pressing against the windshield like a living thing trying to look inside. The truck's headlights barely cut through, and the yellow beam seemed to die just a few feet ahead. I kept my hands tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Asim sat beside me, his face pale, his lips still moving in silent prayer. He had stopped covering his ears. He had stopped looking back. He just stared ahead at the fog, as if trying to see something that would reassure him that we were still on a real road, still in a real world. I did not speak. He did not speak. The silence between us was heavier than the whispers had been, because the whispers, at least, had been sound. This silence felt like something waiting. After about 20 minutes of driving, I saw a faint light ahead on the side of the road. It was a small tea stall, just a wooden shack with a tin roof, a single yellow bulb burning over a rickety table, and an old man sitting beside a clay stove. A dog lay curled near the stove, its tail tucked. This was a place I had stopped at many times on this route. Normally, I would drive past at night, but tonight something pulled me. Perhaps I needed the sound of a human voice, a living, ordinary voice that did not come from sealed boxes. Asim spoke for the first time in nearly an hour. "Sir, can we stop for 5 minutes? Just 5." I nodded without answering. I pulled the truck to the side and turned off the engine. As soon as the engine died, the silence was deafening. But this was an ordinary silence. The silence of a cold night, of fog, of a deserted road. Not the silence of something holding its breath. We stepped down. The cold air hit my face like a wet cloth. Asim wrapped his shawl tighter. The old man at the stall looked up at us as we approached. He did not smile or greet us. He just looked at the truck, then at us, then back at the truck. His eyes were old but sharp. I ordered 2 cups of tea. The old man nodded and began pouring. As he worked, the dog that had been lying near the stove suddenly lifted its head. It looked toward the back of the truck, then got up, ears flat, and walked away. Not ran, walked, deliberately, as if it had seen something it did not want to see. It went behind the stall and did not come back. The old man glanced at the dog, then at the truck. He placed the cups in front of us without a word. I took a sip. The tea was strong and sweet, but I could barely taste it. Asim kept looking over his shoulder toward the truck. The old man spoke. "Night load." I said yes. "Timber." I hesitated. "Wooden boxes, old household stuff." He was silent for a moment, then said, "No one carries wood on this road at night. Not anymore." I looked at him. "Why?" He did not answer directly. Instead, he pointed toward the direction we were headed. "That road goes past the old cemetery, then a dirt track. There used to be a timber warehouse there, years ago." He paused. "Burned down." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Burned down. "A fire," the old man said. "At night, 7 workers were inside. They couldn't get out. After that, the place was abandoned. Sometimes people say they still see lights there at night, but no one goes, not after dark." I put my cup down. "Then why did someone give me an address? A warehouse near the cemetery, Serdar Timber Warehouse." The old man looked at me with something like pity. "Mister, that warehouse has been gone for 20 years. The owner died in the fire. His name was Serdar Rafik. You're carrying something else, and I think you know it." Asim's hand shook, tea spilling over his fingers. He didn't seem to notice. I said, "We were paid double. The boxes are sealed." "That's how they do it," the old man said softly. "They pay double, they seal the boxes, and they tell you not to stop. They know that by the time you understand what you're carrying, you're already too far to turn back." "Who?" I demanded. "Who is they?" The old man shrugged. "Some say the dead need their belongings. Some say the unburied need to be moved. I don't know. I only know that every few years a driver comes through here with sealed boxes on a night like this, and most of them don't come back this way. The ones who do, they never talk about what happened." I thought of the whispers, the names, the things the voices had known about my wife, my daughter, Asim's mother, his brother. Things no stranger could know. I looked at the truck, still sitting in the fog, its tarpaulin-covered load dark and silent. "How many boxes did the others carry?" I asked. The old man was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I never asked, but the ones who came back, they always said the same thing. They said the boxes counted wrong, that there was one more than they started with, and that one never came off the truck." Asim stood up so fast his chair scraped the ground. "Sir, let's go, please. Let's just finish this." I threw some money on the table, more than the tea cost, and got up. The old man did not touch the money. He just looked at me and said, "When you get to the cemetery road, don't look at the graves. Don't read the names. Deliver what you have and leave. And if you see an 8th box when you've only loaded 7, do not count it. Do not touch it. Do not speak to it." I wanted to ask more, but the old man had already turned away. He picked up a rag and began wiping the counter, as if we had already left. We got back into the truck. Asim was shaking. I started the engine. And the heavy growl of the diesel felt like the only real thing in the world. I pulled back onto the road, and as I drove away, I looked in the side mirror. The T-stall's yellow light shrank to a pinprick, then vanished in the fog. The old man was not watching us, but the dog was, standing at the edge of the stall, staring after the truck, its eyes reflecting the headlights of an oncoming vehicle that wasn't there. The road became narrower. The paved surface gave way to patches of gravel, then dirt. I was following the address written on the slip of paper, but the landmarks were few. A broken milestone, a dead tree with a tire hanging from it, a line of poplars bent by the wind. The fog pressed in, and the truck's headlights seemed weaker now, as if the darkness was winning. I checked the time. It was nearly 3:00 a.m. Dawn was still 2 hours away. Asim broke the silence. "Sir, what did that old man mean the boxes count wrong?" I didn't answer. I was thinking about the loading. We had loaded 7 boxes. I had watched each one go in. The men had counted them out loud. But then, at the tea stall, the old man had said that the ones who came back always said there was one more than they started with, one that never came off. I shook my head. "He's an old man, he tells stories, don't let it get to you." But the words felt hollow even as I said them. A few miles later, the road forked. The main route went straight, leading toward a small town. The other branch was a dirt track, barely wide enough for the truck, disappearing into a wall of fog and trees. A signboard stood at the fork, but it had been shot through with rust. The only words I could make out were cemetery and Ard. The word Sirdar was nowhere to be seen. I took the dirt track. Immediately the atmosphere changed. The trees on both sides were old, their branches tangled overhead, blocking what little light might have filtered through the fog. The road was rough, full of ruts and potholes. The truck jolted and groaned, and from the back came a sound, not a whisper, not a knock, just a low, continuous hum like a distant engine idling. But there was no engine back there. Asim heard it too. He looked at me and I shook my head. "Ignore it." We drove on. The hum grew louder, then softer, then stopped, then started again. It had no rhythm I could understand. Sometimes it felt like a voice, but no words came, just a sound deep and old like the earth itself was humming. Then through the fog I saw lights. Dim, yellow, flickering, not electric lights but lanterns, 2 of them hanging from a gate. The gate was iron, tall, and beyond it was a low building with a sloped roof. To the left I could see the edge of a cemetery, old graves, some with broken headstones, some with cloth draped over them. A large neem tree stood in the middle of the graveyard, its branches spreading like arms over the dead. I pulled the truck to a stop before the gate. As soon as the engine died, the humming from the back stopped. The silence was complete. Even the wind seemed to have paused. I took the slip of paper from my pocket. Old Western Cemetery, end of dirt road, Sirdar Timber Warehouse. This was the place. A man came out from the building. Tall, thin, wearing a cap and a black shawl over his shoulders. He carried a lantern, but the light did not reach his face, just illuminated his hands and the ground in front of him. He walked to the gate and opened it without speaking. Then he gestured for me to drive in. I pulled the truck into the yard. It was not a proper warehouse yard, just an open space in front of the building surrounded by high walls. The ground was bare earth, wet and cold. In the corner I saw stacks of old timber rotting, covered with moss. No fresh wood, no activity, just dust, dampness, and silence. The man with the lantern approached my window. "Zafar driver." "Yes," I said. "You're late." I looked at the clock on the dashboard, 3:45 a.m. "Dawn is still early," I said. He said nothing. He gestured again, and 4 more men emerged from the building, all wrapped in shawls, their faces hidden in shadow. They moved to the back of the truck and began to untie the ropes. I got out to watch. Asim stayed in the cabin, his face pressed to the window. The first box was unloaded. As they carried it toward the building, I heard a sound, a faint, soft sigh, like someone breathing out after holding their breath for a very long time. I looked at the men carrying the box, but they showed no reaction. They placed the box near the wall that bordered the cemetery. Then they went back for the second. One by one, the boxes came off. Each time I listened. Each time I heard something, a sigh, a rustle, a faint tap from inside. But the men did not flinch. They moved like machines, silent and deliberate. When the seventh box was unloaded, the man with the lantern came to me and handed me a receipt. I looked at it. There was a stamp, but the ink was smudged. The name written on it was Rafik Ahmed, Supervisor, Serdar Timber Warehouse. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. The man gave me the rest of the payment. The notes were cold, as if they had been stored in a freezer. I turned to leave. Asim had gotten out of the cabin and was standing near the back of the truck, looking at the empty floor. His face was pale. He walked to me and whispered, "Sir, the seventh box. It's still in the truck." My heart jumped. I walked to the back and shone my torch inside. The floor was empty, no box. I looked at Asim angrily. "There's nothing there." He shook his head. "I saw it just now at the very back, and there was a number on it, 8. I grabbed his arm. "We loaded 7, we unloaded 7. Count your head, not your fears." But as I said it, I felt something cold. Not from the air, from inside me. Because I had counted 7 when we loaded, and 7 when we unloaded. But Asim had no reason to lie, and his face was not the face of someone playing a trick. I looked back at the truck. The tarpaulin was still tied. Nothing moved. I walked around to the driver's side, got in and started the engine. Asim climbed in beside me. He was trembling. "Sir," he said, "on the way back, don't look in the side mirror." I didn't ask why, I just drove. We left the gate, passed the cemetery, and turned onto the dirt track. The fog was as thick as before, but now there was a faint gray light in the east. Dawn was coming. I kept my eyes on the road. I did not look in the mirrors. I did not look back. But I heard it. A single knock. From the back of the truck, not from the boxes, from the empty floor where no box should have been. Then silence. The single knock from the back of the truck echoed in my ears long after the sound had faded. I kept driving, my eyes fixed on the narrow dirt track ahead. The fog was thinning now, and in the east, a pale gray light was beginning to seep through the trees. Dawn was coming, but that knock had not sounded like wood against wood. It had sounded like knuckles, like someone asking to be let in. Asim was silent beside me. His hands were clasped together in his lap, his lips moving in constant prayer. He did not look back. He did not look at me. He just stared straight ahead, his face blank with exhaustion and fear. We drove for what felt like an hour but was probably only 20 minutes. The dirt track merged into the paved road, and the paved road widened into the main highway. The fog lifted gradually, turning from a thick white blanket to a hazy mist, then to nothing at all. The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, and suddenly the world was ordinary again. Fields, villages, a donkey cart on the roadside, a man cycling to work. Normal. Safe. I pulled over at a roadside mosque. We had not prayed since the night before, and I needed to wash the cold from my hands and face. Asim followed me silently. We performed our ablutions, prayed, and then sat on the steps of the mosque, watching the sun rise. Asim spoke first. "Sir, are we going back to that place?" "No," I said. "But we need to know," he insisted. "What were we carrying? Who were those men? And why did I see an 8th box?" I had no answers, but I knew he was right. A driver cannot spend his whole life running from something he does not understand. If I did not go back, the questions would haunt me forever. And the whispers, those whispers that had known my daughter's fever, my wife's latch, Asim's brother stealing money, they had not come from nothing. They had come from somewhere, from someone, or something. "We'll go back," I said, but in daylight, and we'll take another vehicle, not the truck." Asim nodded. We drove the truck back to the transport yard, parked it, and took a local minibus toward the old industrial area. Then we hired a rickshaw to take us to the cemetery road. The rickshaw driver looked at us oddly when we gave him the directions. "That road leads to the old graveyard," he said. "No warehouses there, not for many years." "Just take us," I said. He shrugged and drove. The journey in daylight was completely different. The fog was gone. The trees that had seemed menacing and twisted the night before were just ordinary pines, green and still. The dirt track was rough but visible, and the rickshaw bounced over the ruts until we reached the fork where the signboard stood. In daylight, I could read the sign, "Old Western Cemetery, 2 km. No mention of any warehouse. We got out and walked the rest of the way. The cemetery was there, old, silent, overgrown with grass and wild bushes. The headstones were crooked, some broken, some so worn that the names had faded to nothing. The neem tree stood in the middle, its branches casting long morning shadows over the graves. And next to the cemetery where the warehouse had stood the night before, there was nothing. No building, no gate, no walls, no yard, just an empty patch of ground covered with dry leaves and scattered stones. The ground was raised slightly as if something had once been there, but it was gone now. I walked to the spot where I remembered the truck had been parked. The earth was hard and cold. No tire marks. No sign that any vehicle had been there recently. Asim stood at the edge of the cemetery, staring at the graves. "Sir," he called, his voice shaky, "come look at this." I walked over. He was pointing at a row of graves at the back of the cemetery, the row closest to where the warehouse should have been. There were 7 graves side by side. Their headstones were newer than the others, less worn, and on each headstone a number was carved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The numbers were painted in white, the same style as the numbers on the boxes. I knelt beside the first grave. The name was worn, but the date was still visible, 22 years ago. The same date appeared on the next grave and the next. All 7 had died on the same night. I stood up, my legs weak. Asim was reading the name on the 7th headstone. "Rafik Ahmed," he whispered. I pulled the receipt from my pocket, the smudged stamp, the name. Rafik Ahmed, supervisor, Serdar Timber Warehouse. The man who had met us at the yard. The man who had paid us, the man whose picture I had seen on the wall of the old office. I looked at the grave. The dates matched. Rafik Ahmed had been dead for 22 years. Asim grabbed my arm. "Sir, the 8th grave, there's an 8th grave." I turned. A few feet away, behind the row of 7, stood a single headstone, older than the others, its surface blackened with age. No number, no name, just a date. The same date as the others, and at the bottom, carved in worn letters, the words, "Here lies the 8th, never found, never buried, but never gone." The rickshaw driver had followed us on foot. He was standing at a distance watching us. I walked to him and asked, "What happened here?" He hesitated, then said, "You really do know, 22 years ago there was a timber warehouse next to this cemetery. Serdar Timber, it was run by a man named Rafik. One night a fire broke out. 7 workers were trapped inside. They all died. The warehouse burned to the ground. After that, people said the place was haunted. No one rebuilt. The owner's family buried the 7 here in this row." "And the 8th grave?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "The 8th is not a grave, it's a marker. Some say there was an 8th worker that night, a man who was never found. His body never recovered. But his spirit, they say it still walks. And sometimes on certain nights people see the warehouse standing again. Lights in the windows, men moving boxes. And they say if you stop there, if you take a load, you are helping them carry the dead." I thought of the boxes, the whispers, the voices that knew our secrets. The child's cry that turned to laughter, the knock from the empty truck, and the number 8 that Asim had seen. "Who hires the drivers?" I asked. The rickshaw driver shook his head. "No one knows. The offers come through brokers, but the brokers are never found afterwards. Some say it's the dead themselves, looking for help to move what was never properly buried. I looked back at the empty field where the warehouse had stood. In daylight, it was just grass and stones, but I remembered the lights, the gate, the men in shawls, the lantern, the cold notes in my hand. "There is one more thing," the driver said. "The old watchman who used to work at the warehouse. He survived the fire because he was not there that night. He is still alive. He lives in the village down the road. If you want to know more, you should talk to him." We took the rickshaw to the village. It was a small place, a cluster of mud houses around a mosque. The driver pointed to a house at the end of the lane. "That's where he lives. His name is Ibrahim." We found Ibrahim sitting on a charpay outside his house, a blanket over his shoulders, his face weathered and wrinkled. He was older than I had expected, but his eyes were clear. When we introduced ourselves and told him why we had come, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You carried the boxes last night." It was not a question. I nodded. 7 boxes. "Yes," I said. Then I added, "But my helper saw an 8th." Ibrahim closed his eyes. "The 8th is always there. It was there the night of the fire. It was there before, and it will be there after we are all gone." He told us the story. 22 years ago, Serdar Timber was a thriving business. Rafik Ahmed was a good man, strict but fair. He employed 8 workers, all from the surrounding villages. They worked hard, loading and unloading timber, cutting and stacking. But there was one worker, a man named Gulem, who was different. He was quiet, kept to himself, and some said he knew things he should not have known. He would talk to the graves in the cemetery next door. He would sit by the neem tree at night, whispering to someone who was not there. Rafik Sahib did not like it, Ibrahim said. He told Gulem to stop, but Gulem would not stop. He said the dead needed him. He said the unburied had messages to send. The fire started just after midnight. No one knew how. The workers were sleeping in the warehouse. Ibrahim was not there. He had gone to his village for a family matter. By the time the villagers saw the flames, it was too late. The warehouse was a furnace. 7 men died. Gulem the 8th was never found. His body was not in the ruins. It was not anywhere. After the fire, Ibrahim continued, strange things happened. People driving past the cemetery at night would see lights in the warehouse. They would hear sawing, hammering, men talking. But the building was gone. Some drivers reported being stopped by men in shawls who offered them double payment to carry sealed boxes. The boxes always went to the cemetery road, and the drivers always came back changed, quiet, fearful, unwilling to speak about what they had seen. "Why did you never tell anyone?" I asked. Ibrahim laughed bitterly. "Who would believe me? The police said it was an accident. The owners took the insurance money and left. The villagers stopped going near the cemetery after dark. It became one of those stories told to children to keep them from wandering at night." "But the boxes," Asim said, "what is inside them?" Ibrahim looked at him, then at me. "I don't know. No one who has opened one has ever told. But I heard Rafik Sahib say once before he died that Gulem had been collecting things, pieces of the dead, bits of cloth, hair, bones from the oldest graves. He said Gulem believed that if you gathered enough pieces, you could bring someone back." The sun had risen fully now, but I felt cold. I thought of the damp mud I had seen under the 7th box, the wet marks on the floor of the corridor, the smell of old earth and perfume. "What happened to the 8 boxes?" I asked. Ibrahim shrugged. "Some say they are still out there, being carried from one place to another, never reaching a final destination. Some say the dead cannot rest until the 8th is found, and some say the 8th does not want to be found." We thanked him and left. As we walked back to the rickshaw, I took the receipt out of my pocket, the smudged stamp, the name. I turned it over. On the back, written in faint pencil, were words I had not noticed the night before. "The 8th is waiting. Do not open any box. Do not count. Do not look back." I showed it to Asim. His face went white. "We looked back, sir," he whispered. "In the mirror, I saw the 8th box." We got into the rickshaw and drove back to the city. Asim did not speak. I did not speak. The rickshaw driver, sensing our mood, stayed silent as well. When we reached the transport yard, I went straight to my truck. I climbed into the cabin and sat there for a long time, my hands on the steering wheel. The truck was empty. The tarpaulin was folded. The ropes were coiled. But I could not shake the feeling that something was still there, something small, something cold, something that had ridden with us and had not gotten off. That evening I called the broker who had arranged the load. The phone rang and rang. No one answered. I called again the next day. The number was disconnected. I went to the office he had given as his address. It was a closed shop, shutters rusted, dust on the lock. The neighbors said no one had been there for years. I never saw the man in white again. I never saw the men in shawls. I never saw the warehouse, though I drove past the cemetery road several times in daylight just to be sure. The field was always empty. But sometimes on foggy nights when I am driving a long route and I see a faint light in the distance, a lantern, a flicker, a glow that does not belong, I slow down. And then I remember, and I press the accelerator and do not stop. Asim left trucking a few months later. He took a job in his village working on a farm. He called me once 6 months after that night and said, "Sir, I saw the 8th box again. In a dream. It was on the truck, and the number on it was not 8 anymore. It was my name." I did not know what to say. I told him to recite his prayers and forget the dream. But I have not forgotten anything. Not the whispers that knew my daughter's fever. Not the child's cry that turned to laughter. Not the knock from the empty truck. And not the 8th grave, the one with no name, the one that said, "Never found, never buried, but never gone." I am still driving, I have to earn a living, but I no longer take night loads. I no longer accept double payment. And if a broker tells me, "Do not stop, do not open, do not look back," I walk away. I do not ask why. Because I know now. There are things in this world that should have been buried but were not, and they need drivers. They need trucks. They need people who will carry them through the fog from one dark place to another without asking what is inside the boxes. May God protect every driver on every road, especially those who drive at night, especially those who carry what they cannot see. May He give us the wisdom to refuse the loads that are not meant for the living, and may He forgive us for the times we did not stop and for the times we looked back. If you liked this story, please like the video and leave a kind comment. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories from the road. We will meet again, God willing, with another story.